Hello and welcome to another episode. This time around, we're going to be taking a look at Donkey Kong 64. With the upcoming release of Donkey Kong Bonanza, which I am just super stoked for, I thought it would be a good time to reflect back on Donkey Kong's only other 3D game and what I think about it. So let's jump right into this.
Here we go.
Donkey Kong 64 came out in 1999, and it was the first and only 3D Donkey Kong game up until Donkey Kong Bonanza. It was made by Rare, and at the time they were making all sorts of games for the Nintendo 64, Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye, etc. There was a lot. And this game came with the Nintendo 64 expansion pack. It was included in the box, and got my N64 here. You would just open this thing up and insert this like so, and your N64 would be expanded. Now, I am not super knowledgeable about what the expansion pack does, but my understanding is that it increases the RAM of the Nintendo 64 to allow for more textures to be loaded in and that sort of thing. A few games used it, including Donkey Kong 64, of course, and Majora's Mask. I'm not sure what else, but at least you could just kind of put it in there and then just forget about it, which was nice. And the cartridge was nice and yellow, which looks really good with my Jungle Green N64. Got a very jungle vibe, which is nice. And I got this game close to when it came out, I think. I don't know if it was right at launch, but it came out in 1999. I think I got it around that time, maybe around 2000, something like that. I had been a Donkey Kong fan for a little while then, pretty much since I got my Super Nintendo, which I got my Super Nintendo around the mid to mid-late 90s, and one of the reasons I got a Super Nintendo was because of Donkey Kong Country, but that's another story. And so I was very excited about this. I really loved Banjo-Kazooie, I loved Mario 64, I loved Donkey Kong Country, so I was quite pumped. And when I got it, I remember playing it for a while, and it was fun. It was okay. I eventually got to a boss that I couldn't beat and as a kid, and I just put it down. And years later, I went back and re-beat the boss, not that long ago, actually. I still haven't actually finished the game. So take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt, but I do think I have a fairly good idea of the overall game and its structure, even though I haven't completed it. It's just a game that I tend to bounce off of a little bit. And I'm not entirely sure why, because I really, really love the Donkey Kong Country games. Those are definitely some of my favorite games of all time. Now, in case you're not super familiar, the Donkey Kong Country games are 2D platformers with a ton of replayability and collectibles and a lot of sort of fast-paced platforming action. Donkey Kong 64 is a 3D platformer, much like Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie. In fact, it's a lot like Banjo-Kazooie. And I definitely agree with some of the design for this game. I think taking something like Donkey Kong, which was all about collecting the bananas, grabbing a bunch of items and stuff in the stage, and turning it into a, very standard kind of late 90s, early 2000s collectathon game was not a bad idea. I think that sort of works for me. If anything, I'd say it makes more sense for Donkey Kong than it would for something like Mario. I think the problem with this game for me is a little bit the execution. Now, I don't have any real critiques against Rare at this time. They were pumping out games constantly. I don't know how many dev teams they had, but I mean, we were getting a Rare game on the N64 like every year or something like that. So I have no criticism to them just doing what they could. But in many ways, I do feel like Donkey Kong 64 almost feels like a Banjo-Kazooie with a Donkey Kong theme slapped on top of it. And it just doesn't work as well for me. I love Banjo-Kazooie. I think it's a great game, and I haven't finished Banjo-Tooie either, but I have finished Banjo-Kazooie a few times. I really like it. I don't know if I like it more than Mario 64, but I really like the game. I think it's fantastic. It's got so much good design and theming and just really fun gameplay. For Donkey Kong 64, I think part of the problem is that, again, it just kind of feels like Banjo-Kazooie in some ways. Yeah, there's some stuff in here that's very Donkey Kong, like, you're collecting bananas and stuff, and you're changing which Kong you use in each stage, and so you can kind of choose the different ones that have the different abilities, and that's all fun, and I like it. A lot of complaints about this game over the years have been the fact that you need to be a certain Kong in order to collect certain bananas. So you can't collect blue bananas unless you're tiny, I think, and you can't collect purple bananas unless you're I forget who. And so if you see a red banana, you can't get it unless you're Diddy. And so there's a lot of backtracking in the game, and it's a fair critique, but honestly, it doesn't bother me that much. What bothers me is that it doesn't really feel like Donkey Kong. It feels like Banjo-Kazooie, once again, but not as good. I love Banjo-Kazooie. I think it's really good, but this game, it just doesn't feel as good. I think part of it is the fact that in Banjo-Kazooie, everything is sort of created around the design of the characters. So you can fly because you've got Kazooie, and you can do the trot that makes you run faster because of Kazooie, but then you've also got certain attacks that are because of Banjo. Everything's just built around that. And while they tried to do that around the Kongs in this game, it feels more contrived here, especially since most of the cast is new, and we already had several Kongs that they could have used from the country games that they didn't bring over. And so, yeah, Tiny can shrink and fit into little tiny spaces, but it just feels so much more contrived than the stuff from Banjo-Kazooie. It just doesn't feel as natural. Additionally, I think part of the problem is that coming from Donkey Kong Country, and those games are all about what I like to call flow, where you are sort of getting into a rhythm. You've got a momentum with your character, and as you get better at the game, you can sort of feel your sense of speed building up as you're moving through the levels. Whenever you do the sort of rolling attacks, you gain speed again, so that then you can keep doing that, and they just feel like they've got this really good flow. This game doesn't feel anything like that at all to me. It feels like a standard 3D platforming collectathon, and I think that losing some of that Donkey Kong Country identity was a miss for me. Now, I realize this is not called Donkey Kong Country 64. It's not meant to be the same sort of game, but, at the time, that's, I think, what I was expecting, and I think even today, it still feels like that would have worked better for me. Now, it's possible that Rare just didn't have the tech to do a more fast-paced platforming game like that back then, and that they used most of the framework that they were using for Banjo-Kazooie. That would sort of make sense since, again, they were pumping these games out so quickly. And again, this isn't necessarily a critique on Rare. I just think that this game would have really benefited from having the time put into it to really iron out the controls to make it really feel like Donkey Kong. I also think the level design isn't as good as Banjo-Kazooie. I can't quite put my finger on it. I think maybe they're just too big and mazy, but when I'm running around in Banjo-Kazooie, I feel like the levels are really fun to look at. You can sort of work out routes and stuff, and you can see the level if you climb up maybe to a tall place, and you can kind of look down on the level and you can get a better view of it. I feel like in Donkey Kong 64, you can't really do that. I don't know if it's the draw distance or what, but it just doesn't work as well for me. I don't feel like I ever really have a good gauge of what the levels look like. I think it may have something to do with the fact that most of these levels have caves and tunnels, and so you can never see the whole level or even half the level, and they're absolutely huge, which makes it even harder to kind of learn them. They just end up feeling really mazy. Maybe it's just the fact that I've played more Banjo-Kazooie, but I just can't enjoy these levels as much as I enjoy the ones from Banjo-Kazooie. And when you couple that with the lack of flow from the country games, it just ends up feeling kind of clunky and sluggish. It does make me sad that Nintendo has never revisited the 3D Donkey Kong games until now, but it also makes me very excited for Donkey Kong Bonanza. I've been waiting for that game for over 25 years now for another 3D Donkey Kong game. Like I said, I'm a really big fan of the series, and the 2D games are really good. I particularly enjoy, too, the Donkey Kong Country Returns games. Both of them are fantastic. Tropical Freeze being one of my favorite platformers of all time. But Donkey Kong 64 just didn't quite land right with me. And although I don't dislike the game, I think it's pretty good. It's just not as good as the others. They were definitely trying to recapture some of the magic of the Donkey Kong Country series. I mean, there are minecart levels and things like that. You've got the animal buddies. Instead of riding them, you transform into them, so that's a little bit different, but it works mostly the same way. I just never felt like it captured the real essence of the gameplay. I think all of the theming is mostly here, but the gameplay is where I think it drops the ball. I also have to talk a little bit about the whole Donkey Kong with guns thing. Now, first of all, I don't think it's necessarily like a terrible aesthetic. I think they did a good job with like the coconut gun and stuff like that. But man, I really hate the gameplay of the guns. It slows down the game even more to have to stop and like aim at something. And they do it for puzzles and for combat. And, I just don't really love that. I don't love that. I think it's the type of thing that like was interesting when we first saw it, in the 90s when like console shooters just weren't as much of a thing. And of course, Rare made GoldenEye. And so there was maybe some inspiration there from themselves. But I don't like the guns. I don't like the gun system in this. I feel like it takes what is kind of a sluggish game and just brings it even more to a crawl. There are also some like minor aesthetic things I don't love about the game, and this is just a really minor nitpick. You might feel totally different about it, but I don't like that Cranky's like a mad scientist in this instead of just like your grandpa who's just grumpy. It feels kind of weird and out of nowhere. I also think turning Funky, the surfer dude with an airline, taking him and turning him into a sort of military arms dealer is also a weird choice to me. I think it's supposed to be funny. A lot of these Rare games were really trying to be like super humorous back then, but it just doesn't really work for me. I don't know. I realize that Donkey Kong lore is not something to get super worked up about, and that plenty of games have, their big characters doing different things in different entries. So again, just a very minor nitpick, but it's just kind of weird. In some ways, I feel like this is a game of maybe too much. I feel like maybe there are too many Kongs to switch between. Maybe the levels are a little bit too big. Maybe there's too many things to collect. I think if they had scaled it back a bit and focused more on making the gameplay feel more like Donkey Kong Country in 3D, I think the game would have been more of a classic for me. But as it stands, I just don't like it as much as Banjo-Kazooie or as much as Donkey Kong Country. Again, I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's pretty good. It's just that most of the time if I'm playing it, I'd rather be playing Banjo-Kazooie or Donkey Kong Country. One thing we can all agree on, though, is that the DK Rap is an absolute classic, and everybody should play this game, if nothing else, to listen to this. I hope one day I can get kind of hooked on it a little bit, enough to at least finish it, because I still have yet to finish it. And again, I think there's a lot to enjoy in it. I just think it could have been better. But hopefully, Donkey Kong Bonanza will be a really strong 3D entry for Donkey Kong. It's a character I really like, and Bonanza looks really, really good. I've only seen the first trailer of it. I didn't watch the direct for it, because I'm very eager to just get into the game without knowing anything. But I'm very excited about it. And seeing how good of a job Nintendo did with Kirby and the Forgotten Land and their other 3D games on Switch, I'm really hopeful that Bonanza will be an awesome entry to the Donkey Kong series. I'm excited to get my hands on the game and give a sort of first impressions here when I do, so stay tuned for that. Sadly, I don't think this game is on Nintendo Switch Online, which is a real bummer for people who might want to play it. But yeah, if you have played it, let me know your thoughts. Do you like it? Do you like it more than Banjo-Kazooie or Donkey Kong Country? Let me know down below, and as always, thanks for watching.